On the day I gave birth, I caught my husband accompanying his ex-girlfriend for her prenatal checkup. She asked, "Julian, is it okay that you're not there for Lily's delivery?" He replied, "It's fine. She's not that delicate." In that moment, I finally realized that the husband who supposedly loved me to the bone actually didn't love me at all. 2 days before my due date, Julian Gu was unreachable. I called him countless times, but every call went unanswered. I had no choice but to go to the hospital alone to await labor. Contractions came wave after wave. The pain so intense I could barely breathe. I slumped against the headboard, cold sweat pouring from my forehead. My cervix refused to dilate. The doctor suggested I take a walk outside to help things along. The nurse helped me into my coat and supported me as we walked the corridors. I smiled and talked to my belly, feeling the baby move inside, wondering if it was a boy or a girl. But before my words even faded, I heard a familiar voice. Someone asked him, "Julian Gu, is it really okay that you're not there for Lily's delivery?" He replied, "It's fine. She's not that delicate." Right by the elevator, as the nurse helped me over, Julian Gu was pressing the elevator button. He was also supporting another expectant mother. He looked down at her, his eyes brimming with boundless affection, as if she were the one who should be his wife. I stared fixedly at him and asked, "Julian, why are you here?" He panicked, stumbling over his words. But then a pain began to grip my abdomen. He reached out to steady me, but I took 2 steps back. I asked again, "Julian, why are you here? Who is she?" Another wave of pain washed over me. Cold sweat beaded on my forehead, layer after layer. My heart felt as if gripped by a pair of large hands, twisting and squeezing relentlessly. The pain stole my breath away. As the doctors wheeled me into the delivery room, I saw that woman flash a faint smile in my direction, her hand resting on her belly. She asked Julian, "Do you think it's a boy or a girl?" He said, "Either is fine." They looked exactly like a deeply affectionate married couple. Before I could be wheeled in, Julian Gu stepped forward and grabbed the doctor's hand. He insisted, "No, epidural. It'll make the child less intelligent." A thud echoed. My heart plunged into an icy abyss, freezing me to the core. Tears slid slowly from the corners of my eyes as I clutched desperately at the doctor's coat. I whisper hoarsely, "I need the epidural. It must be done. Listen to me." Julian Gu tried to speak again. I cut him off. "It's me giving birth. Not you." Only then was I finally pushed into the delivery room, but the baby was too large. Stuck, I felt like I was dying. They had to perform an emergency C-section. I could still hear Julian's mother shrieking incessantly outside the delivery room, yelling, "No C-section, a C-section baby won't be smart," deafening, as if she wanted the whole world to hear. In that moment, I finally understood. All of Julian Gu's kindness toward me had been a lie. What he truly wanted wasn't my love, but my money. In the end, I had to have a C-section. When I woke up, the baby was lying beside me. Julian Gu's mother brought over a greasy pig's trotter soup and placed it by my bedside. She said to me, "Lily, this soup is the best for promoting lactation." Before she could finish, I closed my eyes. The pain in my heart surged in waves. The baby whimpered a couple of times. I turned to get out of bed to prepare formula for him, but Julian grabbed my wrist. He said, "Breast milk is best for the baby." I turned my head and met his eyes, gazing at him with a faint, mocking smile. I asked softly, "Do you have any?" He said, "But you have." I raised my hand and slapped him hard across the face. The force was so strong that I stumbled backward 2 steps. My freshly healed scar throbbed with the dull pain. Holding my wound, I looked up at him. "Julian Gu, you and your mother get out of my room." His mother tried to grab at me, but Julian seized her wrist. They left the room together. Julian Gu and I were university classmates. At first, I didn't like him. I thought his family background was too complicated for me to handle, but he treated me well, thoughtful in every matter, big or small. Day after day, year after year, it went on like this. After graduation, he even stayed in Northwood City because of me. So, we ended up together. But my family didn't approve of our relationship. My mom thought his family was poor. My dad found him shabby and stingy. When it came to marriage discussions, I secretly took out the family register and married him without their knowledge. When my dad saw the marriage certificate, he was furious, threatening to cut ties with me as his daughter. And because I married him, I haven't been in contact with my family since. At first, we lived cramped in a rental apartment. I said, "Julian, I can't even go home because of you." He gently stroked my hair and whispered, "Lily, I'll treat you well for my whole life." Later, when Julian started his business, I sold the apartment my family had bought for me. All the money went into funding his venture. Back then, all my friends advised me not to be impulsive. I said, "Julian Gu and I are husband and wife. What's mine is his." Now it's led to this. My baby and I have nowhere to go. Tears slid from the corners of my eyes. I curled up at the head of the bed, my hands clenched tightly into fists. I didn't even notice my fingernails digging into my palms. Julian Gu's actions were like a blunt knife, slicing into my heart over and over. It hurt so much. The baby's crying pulled me back to reality. Julian Gu had bought some fruit, washed it, and placed it by the bedside. He whispered, "You've worked hard. Dear, have some cherries." I didn't even glance his way. Perhaps he found it too dull, or didn't want to coax me. So he slowly retreated from the room. When I went out to fetch water, I happened to see Julian Gu flirting with that woman from before. She was kissing him, her belly swollen with pregnancy. The kettle in my hand clattered to the ground. He whipped around to look at me. In that instant, all I felt was disgust. Disgusting from head to toe. I slowly stepped forward and slapped Julian Gu hard across the face. I asked him, "Do you have a thing for married women?" Then I turned to the woman and asked, "Does your husband know you're having an affair?" She gave a faint smile. Stepping closer, she whispered, "Lily, you still don't know, do you? The child in my belly is Julian's." Her words buzzed in my ears like flies, repeating over and over, leaving me at a loss for what to do. At first, Julian still showed concern for me. Seeing that I ignored him, he simply stopped coming to the hospital, leaving his mother there to watch the child. The aunt made me a meal and brought it over herself. She handed me the soup beside her. "Lily, drink more soup. It helps with milk production." Before she could bring it over, I impatiently pushed it away. The hot soup splashed on the back of her hand, and she instantly let go. The soup and bowl crashed to the floor. The child's cries mingled with Julian Gu's mother's wailing, making my head feel like it was about to explode. At that moment, she pointed at me and kept shouting, "It's all your fault for being useless, not even able to bear a son. No wonder Julian left you. You totally deserve it." In a fit of rage, she tried to hit me, but the nurse grabbed her just in time. But after years of farm work, she was strong, and the nurse couldn't hold her back. Her palms struck my head hard, weak and drained. I had no strength to resist and took the blow full force. It wasn't until the nurses and security rushed in and dragged her out. Exhausted, I leaned back against the headboard, picked up the child, and soothed her while trying to rest. Julian's mother wasn't well, educated, and acted like their family had a throne to inherit. Every year during New Year's at their place, she brainwashed me in all sorts of ways, saying I must have a son, or else everyone would look down on their family. Back then, Julian would just smile at me and say softly, "Having a daughter is just fine too." That voice was so soft, no one heard it but me. His family spoke too much, and my displeasure was written all over my face. Julian Gu shook his head at me, whispering in my ear, "We'll go home tomorrow. Just bear with it a little longer." And so, I endured for 5 years, only to end up unexpectedly pregnant. Throughout those 10 months, I suffered from constant morning sickness. Countless times during that period, I considered terminating the pregnancy. It was Julian Gu who said that once born, I wouldn't have to care for the child. I'd just give birth, and he'd handle the rest. But his promise fell through. I never imagined that he had never loved me at all. Perhaps he never even had feelings for me. What he truly wanted was always my father's influence and my family's wealth. And I was merely his last resort. In the 3rd year of our marriage, before we had a child, some of his relatives urged him to divorce me. They called me a barren hen, not worth keeping. That was the cruelest thing I had ever heard. Perhaps he had long considered divorce, especially now that he was the widely praised Mr. Goo. The child gradually fell into a deep sleep. I curled up at the head of the bed, the wound throbbing painfully as cold sweat beaded on my skin layer by layer. I felt suffocated, struggling to catch my breath. Seeing me in such a state, Auntie helped me lie down and said, "Lily, if it's not working, just get a divorce." "Okay," I murmured in a low voice. After graduation, aside from spending money on travel, I had married Julian Goo. All these years, I had never held a job. In that moment, I felt utterly exhausted, both physically and emotionally, a weariness that saw no path forward. On the day I was discharged from the hospital, I ran into Julian Goo at the hospital entrance. He was supporting Yvette Yi and brushed past me without a glance. Even when he heard me call his name, he only paused for a moment before hurrying away. I stared at his retreating figure, my hands clenching tightly. It wasn't until my nails dug into my palms, the pain sharp, that I snapped back to reality. Along the way, Annie coaxed Annie, while I gazed out the window. While waiting at a red light, a group of college students passed by, chatting and laughing. It felt like watching a replay of my youth. Back then, I too dreamed of achieving great things. But dreams remained just dreams. Tears slid down the corners of my eyes, regrets slowly sprouting from the depths of my heart. During my postpartum confinement period, Julian Goo never once returned home. He wouldn't reply to my messages or answer my calls. The divorce had to be put on hold for the time being. A friend found his address and sent it to me. I changed clothes, intending to go talk to him about the divorce. But then I saw my parents hesitating at my doorstep. As I pulled the door open, my father paused for a moment and asked me, "Lily, have you eaten yet?" I lowered my head, tears tracing paths down my cheeks. Countless grievances surged within me. Seeing me cry, my mother also began to weep, pulling me into her embrace. Perhaps sensing something was wrong, they suggested I come stay with them. I whispered, "Mom, I'm getting a divorce." They didn't ask a single question, just told me to watch the child for her while she attended to her own matters. The moment the door closed, tears welled up in my eyes again. I wiped them away, but they slowly trickled down, growing more the more I wiped. I asked a friend about Julian Goo's address and parked my car downstairs. Before I could go up, I saw Julian Goo and Yvette Yi approaching from afar. Yvette Yi looked up, speaking to him. He supported her, reminding her to watch her step. They looked deeply affectionate, like a genuine married couple. I composed myself, grabbed the divorce papers from the passenger seat, opened the car door, and slowly stepped out, waiting for Julian Goo to approach me. He paused when he saw me and asked, "Lily, what brings you here?" "I came to give you this." I handed him the divorce papers, passing him a pen as well. "If you have time, let's go to the Civil Affairs Bureau to finalize it." "All right," he replied softly. Then he meticulously instructed Yvette Yi to wait for him to return and cook, as if he were going to be away for a long time. At that moment, I lowered my head and let out a soft chuckle, laughing at how I'd fed my youth to the dogs all these years. Before marriage, my hands never touched household chores. My mother said girls shouldn't learn cooking, washing, or chores. If they do, they'll end up treated like maids. Yet I learned to cook just so Julian Goo could have a warm meal. When I first started, my hands were covered in blisters from burns. He only offhandedly remarked, "If you've no talent for cooking, better not force it." All these years married, he never once stepped into the kitchen. If not for today, I'd never have known he could cook at all. I waited in the driver's seat, watching him walk out of the building toward me. For a moment, it was like seeing him at 18 again. It's just a shame he's no longer that 18-year-old boy. We drove in silence the whole way. He sat in the passenger seat, head bowed, lost in thought. Just before we arrived, he murmured softly, "Lily, I'm sorry." I tilted my head to look at him and chuckled softly. "What exactly are you sorry for? Cheating on me, denying me an epidural during childbirth, or not signing the consent form right away?" For a moment, he froze. Guilt was written all over his face, but his eyes held no trace of remorse. After a pause, He finally said, "There's $5 million in the passbook. The house, the car, they're all yours. I'll also give you 5% of the company shares." He said it in a tone that sounded like charity, but that money was mine to begin with. When I bought the house years ago, it was already worth $3 million. After his business took off, he said he'd pay me back and even open a passbook specifically for it. Yet today, his tone reeked of condescension. "Cash it out," I said softly. "I only want the money in cash." "Fine." Once the paperwork was done, I glanced at Julian Gu in the rearview mirror and felt a weight lift off my chest. I pulled up beside him and slowly rolled down the window. With a faint smile, I said quietly, "Julian Gu, I'll give you a blessing. May you and Yvette, you live happily together for 100 years. I paused, then smiled. "You must call me when you get married. I'll give you a grand gift then." While shopping for clothes for my daughter, I ran into Yvette Yi and Julian Gu, who were also picking out clothes for their child. It was clear Julian had immense expectations for this child. The nanny, seeing them approach, pushed the stroller away to a distance. I quickly checked out and turned to leave. Unexpectedly, I bumped into Yvette Yi again on my way out. This time, she was alone. Julian wasn't with her. She approached from afar, subtly mocking my daughter. I glanced at her, stepped forward, and smiled. "Yvette Yi, is that really Julian Gu's child in your belly?" Her expression froze, and she took a step forward too. Her belly nearly pressed against me. I instinctively stepped back, but before I could retreat further, she advanced again, and behind me was the staircase. If she were to fall, her miscarriage would undoubtedly be blamed on me. Gathering my thoughts, I reached out to steady her and whispered in her ear, "You'll have to give birth to Yvette Yi's child to know who the father really is." Once she was steady, I took the child from the nanny's arms. I walked forward while playfully teasing the little one. A friend told me Yvette had given birth prematurely to fraternal twins, a boy and a girl. The entire Gu family was overjoyed. Even Julian Gu's notoriously difficult mother was beaming with happiness. They planned to host a grand celebration for the twins' full moon ceremony. That day, they invited guests to fill 20 tables. It was as if they were proudly announcing to the world that these were the Gu family's heirs. I entered the venue slowly, having bribed the person in charge of the video presentation. When the video played, it showed footage of Yvette Yi and Julian Gu's relationship over the years. Suddenly, Yvette's voice emerged softly from the recording. She said, "Baby, this is your child. I'll use Julian Gu's money to support you and our baby." Then came the sound of a kiss. Along with the video, photos were displayed, frame after frame. Whispers rippled through the crowd, but before it finished playing, I saw a familiar figure grab Julian Gu by the collar and land a fierce punch. Standing at a distance, I couldn't clearly see the person's face. It was only when I heard the familiar voice that I realized it was my brother, Ethan Fu. Julian's mother seemed severely shocked and fainted on the spot. Ethan Fu gripped Julian's collar and threw another punch, which Julian didn't resist. Because he didn't dare offend Ethan Fu, I stepped forward, grasped Ethan's wrist, and shook my head at him. Turning my head toward Julian, I curved my lips and asked softly, "Are you satisfied with this gift, Mr. Gu?" Meanwhile, Yvette Yi kept shaking her head, crying and trying to explain to Julian. I knew Julian all too well. He was inherently suspicious. He would undoubtedly demand a DNA test and wouldn't treat Yvette well from now on. If it were his child, he'd raise it. If not, he would probably have kicked her out of the house. Julian Gu pushed Yvette Yi away, saying she was an embarrassment. The murmurs in the venue grew louder. Amid the chaos, I grabbed Ethan Fu and pulled him away. In the car, he stared at me with bloodshot eyes, not saying a word, leaning back in the seat. I turned to meet his gaze. "Brother, why did you come back? Why didn't you tell me?" His voice was low, tinged with frustration. I knew he was angry with me. When I got married, he flew back just to slap me hard across the face, saying, "Lily Shen, did you even get to know this person properly before marrying him?" I replied, "I did." That look of disappointment is something I still can't forget. After I married, he was busy expanding overseas business and barely came back 2 days a year. Sometimes he visited me, sometimes he didn't. I didn't answer, lowering my head. Brother, I'm sorry. He said nothing and drove off on his own. After dropping me off at my building, he finally said, Lily, you know I'm not your brother. Perhaps seeing I didn't respond, he laughed softly, then added after a moment, It's late. Go back inside. I need to go home and adjust to the time difference. That laughter carried a hint of sarcasm. I couldn't tell whether he was laughing at me or at himself. Right, Ethan Fu wasn't my biological brother. Yet, when we were young, he told me he could only ever be my brother. Ethan Fu came to live with our family when he was 14. His parents were my father's subordinates who died together in a car accident during a business trip, leaving only Ethan, who was still at boarding school. Initially, his grandparents wanted to take him back to their hometown, but considering their advanced age and the difficulty of caring for him while he attended school, my father simply brought him into our home. At first, he was cautious, unfamiliar with our household, even afraid to speak above a whisper. My parents didn't dare get too close, fearing he might resent it. When we attended banquets, I would be the center of attention while he was pushed to the outskirts of the crowd. His eyes were profoundly dim. During his stay at our home, he often stood upstairs, gazing downward. He said, Lily, I want to keep company with the wind. At that time, I felt his will to live was very faint. I was terribly afraid he might jump. Time and again, I held his hand. Brother, won't you come play with us? Even at night, I'd have the nanny check on him, repeatedly, fearing he might despair and leap. Fortunately, my parents noticed his condition. They sent him for counseling, and he gradually improved. Everyone says Ethan Fu prospered because of our family, but only I know how capable Ethan Fu truly is. In school, he ranked first in his grade. After graduation, he took over my father's company and expanded its operations overseas. It was he who rescued it when my father was on the verge of bankruptcy. My parents treat him as their own, even though he still refuses to call them mom and dad. Memories flooded back, overwhelming me and giving me a headache. At the family dinner the next day, I brought the child home. The housekeeper helped look after her. My father chatted animatedly with Ethan Fu, while my mother and I sat listening. After a moment, my father turned to me and said to Ethan, Ethan, since you're back, take Lily to the company for some experience. The business will be hers to manage someday. Hearing this, I glanced at Ethan. His expression remained unchanged, as if he'd heard such remarks many times before. He simply replied softly, All right. Holding the child, I introduced her to the family members. When it came to Ethan, I said gently, Annie, this is your uncle. Ethan looked down at me, holding Annie's little hand, and said, It's uncle, not that kind of uncle. He gazed at me intently. I turned away and picked up the bottle from the table to feed the child. And Ethan said nothing more. My father asked Ethan Fu and me to come to the study. He took out the previously gathered information on Julian Gu, placed it on the desk, pushed it toward me, and said, Lily, some things you must do yourself. I understand completely. I won't let Julian go off easily. Ethan Fu reached out to take the documents on Julian, but I snatched them away first. He looked at me. I met his gaze and said softly, Brother, these are things I must handle myself. Whether it takes 3 years or 5, please don't interfere. After hearing my words, he fell into silence, not saying another word. My father instructed Ethan Fu to teach me well, since I've never been in the workplace all these years. After leaving the study, he grabbed my wrist, pulling me into his room. He asked in a low voice, Lily, I can take him down quickly. I lifted my head to meet his eyes and smiled. Brother, this is my own battle to fight. We stared at each other for 3 seconds before he suddenly broke into a smile. Her smile was laced with sarcasm, her tone dripping with mockery. Lily, am I not even as good as him? Otherwise, you... I clasped his hand back, looked up at him, and said softly, If you don't say another word, you'll always be my brother. He stared at me silently, his gaze fixed on me for a full 10 seconds. In the end, he just smiled. As I pulled the door open, I heard Ethan Fu's voice behind me. Wait 10 minutes. I'll drive you. He closed the door. When he reappeared, he was no longer in loungewear. Along the way, I played with the child, not speaking to him. Only after he parked the car did he say quietly, Lily, you can use me. Brother, I lifted my head, meeting his eyes in the mirror. You said it yourself. You're just my brother. His gaze sharpened abruptly, but returned to normal in an instant. He urged me, go back and rest early. Holding the child, I watched him drive out of the complex before slowly entering the building. That night, restless dreams consumed me. They were of my younger self and Ethan Fu. Those dreams, like relentless incantations, tossed me back and forth. In the end, I shattered like a glass ball, broken beyond repair. At 6 o'clock, my mom came to pick up Annie, telling me to tidy up and head to work. Ethan Fu assigned me to the project department, starting with less critical projects. During that time, I ran into Julian Gu a few times, but never saw Yvette Yi. A friend told me Yvette Ye's child wasn't Julian's, so he kicked her out of the house. I finished organizing the files and placed them on the shelf. The nanny gave Annie a bath, wrapped her up, and changed her diaper. I was about to carry her back to the bedroom to rest when someone knocked on the door. At 10 o'clock at night, I had no idea who was knocking, and I felt a bit scared. Handing the baby to the nanny, I walked to the door and saw Julian's mother through the peephole. She kept knocking, and I instinctively stepped back. Seeing that I wasn't opening the door, she shouted from outside, Lily, it's Mom, open up. I want to see the baby. I reached out and turned off the light, staying silent inside the room. The nanny didn't dare move either. Even Annie was sensible enough not to make a sound at this moment. I only wished she would leave quickly. 10 minutes passed, but the knocking didn't stop. Instead, it grew more intense. She continued, Lily, I know you're home. I saw the lights on from downstairs. Open the door quickly. Annie is a Gu family child. Her voice persisted relentlessly. Panicked, I found my phone on the sofa and called Julian Gu. When he answered, he sounded drunk. I said, Julian Gu, your mother is at my place. Come take her away. Now, he replied. She just wants to see the child. What's the harm in letting her look? His tone was utterly indifferent. The nanny carried Annie into the room and locked the door. I didn't dare open the door. My heart gripped with fear, afraid she would snatch my child away. Seeing I wouldn't open up, she began cursing at the door, threatening to call a locksmith. A neighbor came out to intervene, but was shouted down until they couldn't utter a word. With no other choice, I called Ethan Fu. His weary voice came through the receiver, asking, Lily, is something wrong this late? Brother, Julian Gu's mother is here. My voice trembled slightly. Don't be afraid. I'll be right there. Hearing his voice from the other end of the line, I felt somewhat reassured. Then I heard a voice from outside. Lily, if you don't come out, Mom won't leave. I'll just sleep right here. You won't even let me see my granddaughter. You're truly heartless. If it weren't for my son, you wouldn't have the life you have now. One sentence after another. My body shook violently, but I didn't dare open the door. A full hour passed. She went from gentle persuasion to wailing like a banshee. Anyone unaware would think my house was haunted. Ethan Fu hadn't arrived yet, but Julian Gu showed up first. He swayed up the stairs, speaking on his mother's behalf. Lily, Mom just wants to see the child. Nothing else. Before I could finish my sentence, I heard a noise outside the door, followed by a sharp hiss. I knew it was Ethan Fu arriving. I pulled the door open, met Julian Gu's gaze, and said, I won't let you see the child. Take your mother and leave now. Before the words even settled, Julian's mother charged inward. Luckily, Ethan Fu reacted swiftly, grabbing her by the collar and yanking her back hard. She slammed into the wall beside her. Then he turned to Julian and suddenly laughed. What's the matter? Didn't your wife give you a pair of fraternal twins? Watching Julian's face shift from pale to purple, I couldn't help but smirk inwardly. I said coldly, Julian, I will never let you see the child. Even if you sue me and the court rules in your favor, I still won't allow it. Julian stared at me, his eyes completely devoid of emotion. He helped his mother up and headed toward the elevator, but moments later, she broke free from him and rushed back, shoving me to the ground. Her words were filled with nothing but humiliation. Ethan Fu gripped her shoulders tightly and pulled her back. She kept screaming incessantly. I slowly stood up, slapped her hard, and looked up at Julian Gu. Keep your mother in check. If she pushes me too far, We might as well all die together. Ethan Fu pushed her toward Julian Gu. He took my hand and pulled me into the room. He slammed the door shut, stared at me intently, and asked, "What did you mean by what you just said?" I lowered my gaze and smiled softly, whispering, "I was just trying to scare them." Then he pulled me into his embrace, holding me tightly. He rested his head against mine and said slowly, "Lily, you have to live well." "I will," I replied softly. "Of course, I intend to live well. Julian Gu hasn't paid back everything he owes yet. I have to make him lose everything and return every last bit of what he took." The baby's crying snapped me out of my thoughts. I pushed Ethan Fu away and headed toward the bedroom. He followed behind me and said to the aunt, "Pack your things. You can't stay here anymore. Go home with Lily. I don't have much to pack. Everything I need is already at home. I only brought the baby's milk powder, clothes, and diapers." I thought to myself that I probably wouldn't be staying at home for long. Living under the same roof as Ethan Fu would be somewhat awkward. Perhaps sensing my discomfort, he said calmly, "Lily, that's your home. If you don't like me, I can leave." "No need," I blurted out instinctively. "It's your home too." Yes, it was his home too. He had lived in that house for a full 20 years. Time flew by, as if someone had pressed fast forward, afraid that Julian Gu's mother would come looking for me again. I simply sold that apartment and bought a new one. For over a year now, I've been living at home. I've gotten the hang of my job. I spotted a project overlapping with Julian Gu's and snatched it away. Ethan Fu also applied pressure behind the scenes, making many companies afraid to work with him. At the banquet, I watched Julian Gu's new companion, a woman bearing 70% resemblance to Yvette Yi. I chuckled inwardly. He was certainly slick at playing this substitute lover game. After all, the original wasn't dead, just dumped by him. He approached several times to speak with Ethan Fu, but was brushed off each time. Eventually, he shifted his attention to me. He poured tea and water for me, acting utterly subservient. I looked at Julian Gu and took the teapot from his hands. "Mr. Gu, I can handle these things myself." Watching his face stiffen gave me a sense of satisfaction. Later, I overheard him speaking with Ethan Fu again. Ethan Fu tugged at his sleeve, gave a noncommittal "oh," and took a sip from his cup. He murmured softly, "I don't have the final say in company matters." "Then could I trouble you, Mr. Fu, to put in a word? This project is a win-win. If Shin Corp collaborates with us, it'll double the results with half the effort." He obsequiously refilled Ethan Fu's wine glass and waited for his response. Ethan Fu looked at Julian Gu and said with a smile, "Isn't the future head of Shin Corp sitting right beside you?" At that moment, I saw his expression freeze. His face turned a kaleidoscope of colors. Julian Gu only knew my family had some money, but he didn't know my father was the head of Shin Corp, because he had never met my father, only my mother, and my mother rarely appeared in public. He stared at me in disbelief, his doubt unmistakable. Julian Gu couldn't stay seated any longer. He made up an excuse and left. Watching his retreating figure, I couldn't help but laugh. A faint smile also touched Ethan Fu's lips. On the way back, Ethan Fu glanced at me through the rearview mirror and asked, "Do you still love him?" "Who?" A bit tipsy, I was slow to react. After a moment, I replied, "He doesn't deserve it." In the past, I only asked for his sincerity, but later, I realized he had never been sincere with me. Julian Gu came looking for me several times, but each time he was stopped by the reception. Eventually, he stopped coming and began seeking investors at high prices. I knew him all too well. Every time I mentioned a certain price, he would raise his offer even higher. After this happened repeatedly, shareholders withdrew their investments, unwilling to gamble with him. His company's cash flow became strained, and he could no longer afford to keep up. So, he started considering cooperation with us. Right now, he's waiting downstairs at our company, hoping to see me. I glanced at the dozen or so missed calls on my phone and clicked my tongue in annoyance. A light rain was falling outside, just like the day I gave birth. "See me come down." Julian Gu hurried over from a distance. He showered me with flattering words, which only deepened my disgust. I walked up to him, looked him in the eye, and said, Julian, the day I gave birth, it was just like this, utterly helpless, yet I had to endure it. So, every bit of despair I went through, you will experience it all. Before I could step back, he dropped to his knees right in front of me. He begged me to give him a chance. All the investors had pulled out, leaving him with a complete mess. If this continues, he'll have no choice but to declare bankruptcy. He grabbed my pant leg, shuffling forward. Lily, for the sake of being the child's father, please give me another chance. I looked down at him and let out a low chuckle. For a bit of assets, he could abandon his dignity. For the woman he loved, he could cast me aside. For his so-called imperial throne to have an heir, he needed a son. He wanted far, far too much. After a long stare, I said lightly, then declare bankruptcy. I stepped back and added, you reap what you sow. This is what you deserve. In this life, I've never suffered much. The greatest suffering turned out to be marrying Julian Gu. Reflecting on everything, perhaps it was all my own fault. I married him against my parents' wishes. I deceived myself into believing he loved me. So I endured it all. And he should too. Julian Gu ultimately declared bankruptcy. Even so, he was left with a massive debt that couldn't be repaid even after selling the house and car. So he fled to the countryside, making ends meet by doing odd jobs and farming. His mother couldn't handle the sudden downfall and fell ill from the stress. When I saw them again, a doctor rushed past me pushing a hospital bed. His mother lay paralyzed on the bed, staring fixedly at me with eyes full of hatred, as if she wanted to rise and curse me. But she could no longer stand, never would, for the rest of her life. Just as I took the child's hand to leave the hospital, I saw him running up from afar, trying to speak to Annie. Annie hid behind me, her eyes timidly fixed on him. She whispered to me, Mom, who is this uncle? Some inexplicable person, I replied. Then I saw his eyes suddenly redden, as if filled with endless grievance. How utterly ridiculous. Ethan Fu approached from a distance, and Annie ran to hug his leg, saying, Daddy, that really is a strange man. He kept staring at me. He glanced back and replied in a low voice, Everyone in the hospital is a patient. Maybe he has mental issues. I followed behind them, correcting Annie not to call him Dad. She just said, indifferently, fiddling with the Rubik's Cube in her hand. All these years, everyone around me thought Ethan Fu and I should end up together. Even my dad said Ethan and I know each other inside out and should be a couple, but he deserves a better life than that. On Annie's 3rd birthday, Ethan Fu and I took her to the mall to celebrate. She happily ran around the mall and bought a pile of toys. I didn't notice a child bump into her until someone suddenly stepped forward and shielded Annie. It was only when I got a clear look that I realized it was Julian Gu. Annie ran to me, asking to be held, while Julian walked over slowly and asked if she was okay. She shook her head and reached out for Ethan to pick her up. She even held up the hair clip in her hand, asking him if it looked pretty. They acted as if no one else existed, as though they were the true father and daughter. I watched Julian Gu's body tremble slightly, his face filled with regret. But regret is the most useless thing in the world. What's done cannot be undone. As Julian Gu left, his steps were unsteady, and he kept glancing back at Annie and me. But Annie didn't recognize him, nor did she know who he was. You reap what you sow. The sins you commit will come back to haunt you. Annie relied heavily on Ethan Fu, believing him to be the kindest person in the world. Ethan Fu didn't let Annie call him uncle, saying he wasn't my brother. When my parents suggested Ethan Fu go on blind dates, he always found excuses to decline. I thought to myself, even if he never married or had children, it wouldn't matter. Annie would treat him like family, care for him in his old age, and that would be enough. On my 35th birthday, Ethan Fu gave me 2 concert tickets. That day, I ran into him at the venue. From a distance, we locked eyes across the space between us. By the time I caught up, he had already walked far away. Fireworks burst in the sky, brilliant but fleeting. He walked over, took my hand, and whispered, Lily, give me a chance. I don't want to just be your brother anymore. I looked at him and softly replied, Okay, when I was young, I had feelings for Ethan Fu, but he kept pulling away. Every time I took a step forward, he would inevitably take a step back. At 18, I begged him not to go abroad. The overseas business could have been handled by someone else. But he left anyway. He never came back after that. Not until I got married. Back then, he said he wasn't good enough for me, so he could only be my brother. So for many years after, I only saw him as a brother. My feelings for him were buried deep, invisible unless you dug for them. So much time has passed, even I had nearly forgotten. But thankfully, those youthful feelings finally found their way. It feels like a story with a proper beginning and end.